As the temperature starts to warm up this season, I know one of my favorite places in the garden is near the water garden. It's a little cooler and refreshing. And today we're at Pond Pro in Shawnee, and joining us is Mike Miller. And Mike, today we're going to talk specifically about constructing a water garden with koi versus goldfish and some of those differences. Is there a difference?
Yes, they're both members of the carp family. The big difference is the size of the fish. Koi could grow up to 36 inches long, although most of them are not that big. But most goldfish are going to stay in the 6 to 8 to 10 inch range. That's going to be it. And the fact that they're smaller means that people can have a few more of them in their water garden than koi.
Okay.
Because koi grows so large, we need to allow enough room for them to swim around and enough food for them to eat.
So if you want bigger fish, go with koi, but if you want more fish, you might go with goldfish.
That's
or
right.
get a bigger water garden.
And the other thing to think about when you build your water garden is because they feed like this a lot of times.
The koi do?
The koi do, and the goldfish do. The koi need to have a deeper pond.
Okay.
Otherwise, their tail's sticking up out of the water while they're trying to get food off the bottom.
So how deep typically for a koi pond?
In Oklahoma, you can get by with 30 to 36 inches.
Okay.
That would be the least amount of space that you'd want. You could get a smaller one, 18 to 24 for goldfish. If we have a really hard winter, then more than 24 inches is important. So we like to have one area in a pond, maybe this big, that is deeper than 24 inches. So another 6 to 8 inches deeper. That way it gives you a place to corral the fish if you drain the pond to get them out, or it gives them a place to stay cool in our hot Oklahoma summers and to stay warm during our cold winters.
Perfect. And so one of the big things we always hear about is the waste from koi.
Yes.
Is that true, that there's more waste with koi?
Generally speaking, there is, because they are larger fish.
Okay.
And so they eat more, and so there's more waste. And people tend to overstock their ponds. Generally speaking, people have way too many fish. We think 4 inches per 100 gallons of water would be sufficient for your koi to grow up.
Okay.
Now, the problem with that, of course, is that koi have babies, and koi grow 2 to 3 inches a year, so pretty soon you have 18, 24-inch koi, and now your 4 inches per 100 gallons just went right out the window.
Right.
500 gallons is a minimum for an adult koi. That'd be a 24 to 30-inch koi.
Okay, all right. So, and with goldfish, they tend to reproduce a lot too.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
We are overstocking those a lot of times as well?
Yeah, they are cousins. They're both members of the carp family, although different branches. It's like the Jones and the Smiths. And the koi and the goldfish both reproduce about the same.
Okay.
Because people have fewer goldfish, or fewer koi rather, in their ponds, they tend to not think that they're reproducing as much as the goldfish.
Okay.
Now, goldfish will spawn twice a year. Koi only spawn once a year.
Oh.
So you're going to have a difference in their breeding patterns and in the growth of the babies that are called fry.
All right, so what are some of the things that we need to think about as far as building our water garden? We might need a larger filter with koi because of the waste, but what about the rock that goes into a water garden? There
are two schools of thought. Those koi aficionados who are all about their koi don't want any rocks in their pond because a prized koi, might rub up against it and brush off a scale, make a bruise, could cut themselves, so they don't want any rock in their pond at all. Koi are notorious for rooting up plants, so a koi aficionado would not have plants in their pond either. It would be fairly straight-sided. It would have a cone-shaped bottom down to a bottom drain, which helps remove the waste. It would have jets coming out from the side. Remember, koi come from rivers. They like to swim against current, so a jet of water coming out the side gives the fish something to play against.
Oh, okay.
And you'll see them doing that in lots of koi ponds. Now, a water garden, on the other hand, has plants and it has rocks and can have koi in it, so it might be called a koi pond, but it's not what a koi enthusiast would want. A hobbyist who wants jewels in their pond, koi, would have that. They could have goldfish in there. They could have koi and goldfish.
Okay. So they can live together?
Yes, they can.
All right. And so one of the things you mentioned is that koi sometimes dig around in the water garden plants, and I know I've heard that too. Is that always the case with all koi and not with goldfish?
No, not necessarily. Both fish will root the plants up if they're hungry enough. If you feed them, they typically would leave your plants alone. Although all fish have a personality, just like people, and some fish are just meant to tear up plants. It's what they like to do. That's a food source for them in their native environment, so it's genetically bred into them to hunt for food among the plants, and if they don't find it, tear up the plant and eat it.
Okay, all right. So if you're providing them with easy food, maybe they'll leave your plants alone.
That's
but
right.
It is a personality trait.
That's right.
So if we're maybe interested in koi versus goldfish, how do we know the difference? Just looking at them. I always assume koi is a little bit larger, but that's not always the case. There's baby koi.
That's right. It's not always the case, but generally speaking, the koi are going to grow to a larger size. They have a slimmer, tapered body,
okay,
where goldfish are generally short and squatty. They have a defined V-tail on them, where goldfish can have a V-tail or they could have a fan tail. And so you're going to have some basic differences there, but the big one is the whiskers. Koi have barbels, whiskers that hang down on either side, and those generally are meant to help them root around in the rocks looking for food.
Oh, okay. And now they all come in multiple colors.
A wide variety of colors.
White, orange, red, black, both goldfish and koi.
Yeah, koi basically, and goldfish basically have a couple of different body colors. White, black, blue, metallic, or cream. Those would be basic body colors.
Okay.
Then when you add the pigmentation, they could have red or black or yellow or orange or gold. And each of those has a different name. So if you go to buy koi, for instance, you would find that you might have a kohaku or a showa or a sanki or a tancho. And then to differentiate tanchos, you might have a kai tancho, and you might have a high tancho, and you might have, so as you add colors
we
to the
switched
body.
English, didn't we?
That's right, yeah, you go to Japanese then, where they were actually developed.
Yeah.
And first bred back in the 1800s to breed koi, to bring color into the koi. Goldfish, on the other hand, have some basic types, again, sarasa, shibunkin, comets. Then you get into some really fancy ones that most people aren't going to add because they're tropical.
There's fantail goldfish, then there's also the butterfly koi, so they're kind of both fancier looking.
And they have longer fins, and they've been bred to have those long fins on them. That didn't happen until sometime in the late 1900s. Now in Japan, they've bred goldfish since about the 3rd century. So you know that they've had a lot of time to create different breeds, different offshoots of breeds, different species that would help them differentiate between them.
So what are some of those breeds of goldfish? Say I want the look of a koi, but I want the maintenance of a goldfish. What are some of those breeds that I might be looking for?
Well, the sarasa goldfish, generally speaking, is red, but sometimes it often has lots of white on it. So it's a white and red fish, very much like the kohaku koi. And then you have shibunkins, which have the white, the orange, and the black colors on them. Sometimes some blue creeps in there, which is really a faded black. And those would be called a poor man's koi because they have lots of different colors in them, and they really look pretty in a pond.
That sounds right up my alley, poor man's goldfish. All right, well, thank you for sharing with us and enlightening us about the different needs of the two species.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.